Friday, everyone. Can you all hear me okay in the back just to check as well? Yeah, can everyone hear me? Oh, thank you, thank you. Happy Trans Pride, everyone. Happy Pride generally. It's really, really, really good to see you all here. I'd like to politely ask that if you do have any conversations to make, if you could take those all out to the courtyard and bring it back, that would be great, because then it really helps us so everyone can hear us here. But welcome, welcome, welcome. How are we all doing today? We all doing good? Yeah? Great. That wasn't so good. Are we all doing good? Woo! Great. So it's really, really great to have you all here. I'm really glad to be here to celebrate Pride with you all. It's absolutely fantastic. Normally, when I'm up on the stage, I'm doing something very different. I'm giving voice classes, helping people to find their voice and to be able to navigate the world of vocal feminization. But today it's going to be a little bit different. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my journey and how I got here and some different lessons that I learned along the way that I think can just really help out not only in transition, not only in voice stuff, but just in life generally. I do want to give a little bit of a warning out there. We'll be talking about dysphoria at some point today. If that does get a bit much, please do just be aware that is on the menu a little bit. It won't be too intense, but just let you know. And I also, before we get started, want to talk a little bit about the giveaway that we're doing. So as part of Trans Pride, to help to celebrate everything that we're doing here and the wonderful team of the Academy that's helping to make this possible, I've donated a block of 3 different lessons to a value of $280 for one lucky winner here. So all you have to do to take part is to go on ahead and go onto the Discord, fill out the form that you'll find in the notices, I think. And I will be announcing the winner later on Sunday. Please do note you have to be over 18 to be able to enter, and these lessons are non-transferable. So if you think that, you know what, you're actually kind of at the end of your voice journey and you're quite close, wanting a tune-up, it may be better to book in a consultation, but these are more designed for someone who can really get the best out of 3 hours with myself to be able to diagnose the voice, teach them a little bit more, and to be able to make some progress there going forwards. So today, as I say, I want to talk a little bit about how the heck I got here because trust me, a couple of years ago I would have never believed that I was here today. We're going to split this session into 2 different parts. For the first half hour, 25 minutes ish, I'm going to be talking about that stuff, and then we're going to have an open Q&A where you're going to be able to ask me any sort of voice questions or just general questions otherwise as well. So let's get started. I want to talk to you a little bit about where this all started for me. I grew up in England. You can probably tell, although my accent is all over the place. And originally, I thought I wanted to be a dentist, believe it or not. I didn't end up doing anything like that whatsoever. But I've actually been instead teaching voice classes for around about the last 3 years, and I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. So for me, when I was growing up, it was a bit of a different time. I was born in '94, and I know it's not the oldest amongst us here, but still, it was a while ago, and the language out there for trans people, it just didn't exist. The only representation that we really had was on things like Jeremy Kyle or Dr. Phil, or in like some silly magazine or news article. It wasn't very great for us back then. And so I grew up, like so many of us, knowing that there was something a bit off. I think I first started to feel the signs of dysphoria and not feeling right when I was about like 8 or maybe a little bit younger. But I didn't have the language to express it. And so I just thought, it's a weird quirk. I'll probably grow out of it, whatever. There's more important things as school. So my dad, when I was growing up, he always told me, really work hard at whatever you do. And I think that's something that I really hold dear to myself and just in life generally. I think it's so important that whatever we're doing, even if it is just a minimum wage job, working hard at it can really help to teach us the lessons that later on we'll rely on or will help us to be the people that we are. And that's certainly been the case for me as well. I started out in school and did really well. Fortunate to say, things were going great, lots of good grades. But as time got on, as I approached puberty, it just felt like something was missing or wrong. I mean, I felt so often this reoccurring deep desire to be a girl and to be myself, but I just didn't allow it. I didn't allow myself to think in that way. For me, puberty hit like a big old truck. It hit hard and fast when I was 13. My voice was like the first one to drop in all of my year group. And by the time that I was like 13, I had to start shaving every day, believe it or not. Like my voice, it dropped so quick. And, it was right the way down here. This is no exaggeration for where I used to speak. It was like, you. On the bassier side of bass, it was right the way down there. And so it's kind of rough. Um, I kept on plugging away at school. I kept on thinking, well, let's just keep on working hard. But it got more and more difficult for me as time went on. And so I started to grow my hair out. I felt like I didn't really recognize myself in the mirror. And there were all these different classic egg signs that, honey, I think you're going to need to transition this. But in any case, I hated clothes shopping. I hated looking at myself in the mirror. It could be an absolute day ruiner. And it was for years. Um, but I felt like I was the only one because communities like we have here in VRC and on Discord and elsewhere, they were really hidden away. They were inaccessible. They were the domains of support groups for people who had only kind of realized that they were transsexual back then instead of transgender. And it was difficult to access any of that sort of care and community. This is really thankfully not the case anymore. So to help me out and to start to help to try and soothe this raging dysphoria that I had going on inside, I really got deep into music. I found that, well, I couldn't quite feel okay with myself, at least for a few hours. I could whack on some headphones and just like blast Corn or System of a Down or something really angry for a bit. I started learning the keyboard, I started learning guitar, and I started to be able just to teleport myself away from wherever I was in the moment using sound. And it was so, so, so helpful for me. It really, really was. But I found I couldn't last forever. I had to go back to school. I still found that when I looked in the mirror, it was terrible. But I did start to feel a little bit more of community. I started to feel people that the same awfulness that I had inside, they also shared with their music taste, and that, we could kind of find common ground. That I wasn't alone in this suffering that was going on. Um, I also started to really develop at age 13, 14, a huge amount of social anxiety. So again, it's completely a wonder to me that I'm here now, but it's because of everything that went along since. I had so much social anxiety that if I was to walk down the street by myself, and I blended in pretty well, I felt like everyone was looking at me, that like all eyes were on me, and it was just so uncomfortable in my own skin. I couldn't go shopping. I couldn't even go like book shopping because I felt that like, oh my God, people are judging what I'm looking at and how long I'm looking at it. And oh my God, I need to leave. It was terrible. Um, but I found that through music, through performing and starting to just challenge myself and to rock the needle a little bit more from really anxious to just okay. By doing performing and getting out there, I started to really start to come into myself a little bit more and challenge that social anxiety a bit. Life went on. I came up to like, 16, 17, and around about then I went to this house party. It was like one of the first parties I went to. But funnily enough, I was one of the only guys there. Well, guys, quotation marks. And some of the girls there, I was really pally with them. They're like, let's do you up, let's do your makeup up. I was like, no, please don't do that. That'd be terrible. Um, and it turned out that when I looked in the mirror, it felt like this puzzle piece that I'd been dancing around just fell into place. It felt as though that like this missing part of me, this black hole that I didn't have the language or the context or anything to understand. It was just like ka-chunk. This is how you're meant to be. This is how you're meant to look. And I'm sure a lot of you in the crowd maybe have had that moment, that initial feeling of, oh my God, I can be this person. I can change myself. This isn't forever. I'm not cursed. Um, and that was just really pivotal to me. I was just like, everything felt like it changed from that moment. No longer was it like this reoccurrent thought or this thing that was happening, but like a realization that this is me. This is who I'm supposed to be much more. So I kept on trying hard at school. Things went really, really well. I got into gifted and talented, yada, yada. It was great, but I found that I didn't know where the hell my life was supposed to go. Like, I thought, yeah, dentistry, that was my dad's idea. Let's carry on down that line, but it just wasn't for me. And I was getting really burnt out at school. I was trying so hard in an effort to escape my problems at home and internally that I was just burnt out. So what I decided to do was to be like, okay, let's take a year out. Let's stuff uni. Let's stuff the future. Don't care. We can't plan that far ahead. Let's just focus on getting to 22. Let's just focus on getting along through. So I got my first job. And that first job, it was something that I think just changed my life forever. And I think this is one of the core elements that I want to really communicate to you all. Is that I know there's all this sentiment out there at the minute that, minimum wage, minimum effort. But by putting in the graft, by putting in your heart into what you're doing, you grow. I know getting paid pittance sucks. I've been there. I was there for years. But by trying hard at this thing, it made me who I am and made me able to do this. So that first job, it was really hard to get into. There were 3 rounds of interviews, and this was just for a broadband technical advisor job. So the job was people would call up, absolutely irate on the phone, and be like, my internet isn't working. This is terrible. Sort it out. And it was my job to try and pick up the pieces and to try and get that person to a resolution, to get that person where things were sorted out a little bit more. And it wasn't easy. A lot of these people were really wound up. The internet was people's lifeline for information, to be able to do so much stuff in an increasing manner. And they were really, really irate. But I found that, like, by putting in the time to listen to someone and to really let them feel heard, that something transformative happened, that something amazing happened, that you could transmute all this anger and rage into trust and into working alongside each other. Like, I had to ask people to get on their hands and knees to find a socket in the wall, to take it apart, to put it back in, to reset this, do that. And by the end of it, I think anyone would be frustrated. But I found that by making just a tiny bond with somebody, a connection across the void, that you could really get them on board and you'd help them a lot. Um, and I was really surprised, and I kind of really fell in love with that job. There was a saying in the call center that everybody gets the same calls. There is always some negative Nancy that would be like, oh my God, this customer, and then this customer, and then this one, and don't get me started on this one. And they would make it out like they got all the bad customers, that they were like, oh my God, why were you so lucky with getting these nice people? I just had absolute morons all day. But there's a saying, we all got the same calls. We all got the same average sort of tone of people, all with a similar sort of problem set. Sure, everyone would have a stinker every now and again, but we all got the same stuff. And what I realized was that it's what you put into it that got mirrored back to you. If you came into work and you were like absolutely hungover, you didn't want to be there, or having a terrible day, taking your life outside and into work, then I found that the calls were just nasty, dismissive, disrespectful, rude, really horrible to deal with. But on the days where I came in, just sun was shining, had a great day, let's do this. And all of a sudden, that people would hear that in your voice. It was there that I learned that you could actually hear people smiling. And, later on, I found out that's a whole resonance thing with the lips. But you can actually hear when someone is smiling to you. And our brains pick that up. And by putting just a little bit of yourself, your positivity into that, the amount that it bounced back was incredible. You'd have that one good call, and then you'd be like, you know what? Let's have another one. Let's just have a great day. Let's start to build some momentum. And I started to realize that by putting yourself into this, all of yourself, and building momentum, amazing things could happen. And it's all about this idea of momentum. I'll come back in a little bit later. Um, it was incredible. And I found that there was so much you could do to get people on board, to explain things in different ways, and that everyone was different. That for some people, you could be like, oh yeah, ADSL cable into the back of the router, great. Other people would be like, well, the square rectangle that's black, that should have this many lights on. And there were different techniques to get people to understand the same idea at different levels of complication, and that there was so much nuance in being able to communicate these ideas effectively. And so I really found that, like, I had a big sense of purpose there. I think that I was feeling so much dysphoria that I just, like, threw myself into work in the same way that I had with school. Anyhow, anywho, long time we worked there for about a year. I worked there for a year, and, I started university, and in classic egg fashion, I started computer science because, always liked computers, loved Skyrim, loved Doom, loved messing around in those things, so, it was great. But I found that there was, like, a missing human element that, like, okay, I like Java, I like plugging away at it, and some people think I'm an absolute heathen for liking Java, but I'm one of them. Um, so I liked it, but we're missing that kind of element of connection that got me excited. So I worked really hard. I was sitting on a first, but then dysphoria just came down really hard on me, and I didn't finish my degree. I was about 6 months to finishing. I was on an average of around about 85%. And in the UK, that was a first. I was like, yes, this is great. And it all fell apart. My whole life fell apart. Had a really bad breakup. I had all sorts of things happen. And it was really difficult. So I quit. I also at that time had this job that I really loved, that I had lots of friends with. That job fell apart because corporate decided we aren't going to do part-time hours anymore. So like, okay, you're now unemployed, which was great for me. I had to go into bar work, and I found also that that was amazing. That human connection, that element was back. People just having a great time, you mixing up drinks and just sending them. It was great. And if you came in with a good attitude, you had a great time. If you came in miserable, it was shocking. It was terrible. Um, but because of the change in wages, because of me not being able to continue my degree, I actually had to, I was kind of made homeless. I wasn't able to continue renting privately. Prices were going up. My wage was pitiful. So I had to move back in with my parents. And my parents loved them a bit, but it was very toxic space. And so I really just retreated into myself. And that social anxiety that I'd worked so hard to battle after feeling like I could talk to anybody on the world, I just became small again and insular. And I retreated back into my music and into a lot of drinking at the time as well. It wasn't great. And there was this one day that I was making these awful, sad, mournful sounds on this synth that my mum came in and she was like, "Dad named this something up. Like, can we talk about it?" And it's like, "Yeah, well, how long you got? I think I'm trans. I think this is a thing." It'd been past 2016. It'd been past that idea, that time where information had been out, and I could start to have the keywords to search online to understand dysphoria. That's like a thing that I have. I'm not alone in this. And I found out that 0.5% of the population here in the UK is trans. That is thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I know that we represent a fraction in a room, but collectively, there are millions of us. No exaggeration, there are millions of us. And so all of a sudden, it's like, well, what is it that's wrong with this? Where is the shame coming from? And it was just all coming from everything I had been told growing up. And I had to spend so much time just picking it apart and being like, why is it bad to want to shave your legs? Why is it bad to want to have longer hair or not for people on the other side of the fence? And it really started to all come together for me. But my dad found out, and I got kicked out the house pretty much. He wanted to kick me out that day. It was going to probably kick me out anyway, but the pain from seeing him look at me was just so hard to manage. So I was couch surfing for around about 8 months. I was going from friend's place to friend's place, just to not be on the street really, which I know is sadly a common story amongst us. And again, I threw myself into work. I was working around about 60 hours and, starting to get a little bit of normalcy back, starting to get a little bit enough for a deposit. And then, like, boom, the pandemic hit. So thankfully, I was able to just get enough to get a flat right before the pandemic hit. So I was like, not homeless throughout the pandemic, which was great. Um, but I found that, like, I had all this time and I couldn't just dive into music all day. I couldn't go to work. And so what was there left? There was just me sitting with me, which at the time was one of the hardest things to do. And so I was like, you know what? This is really now or never with voice. Previously at work, I'd start to make a few different changes. I started to be able to shave my arms and be like, okay, well, that's comfy enough. Let's try and put on a clear coat of nail varnish and just start to do a few different things to alleviate some of this dysphoria because I still had so much shame with wanting to be a girl, wanting to transition. And I found that I could just tick off these little boxes and just be a little bit less dysphoric. This is okay. And it's around that time that I discovered that voice training was possible. And it blew my mind. I saw people online that had these voices that to me I'd give a she, her to every day of the week. And then all of a sudden they could just like transmit, change it with all the control in the world. And it's like, that is absolutely crazy. I need to do this. But what I found was that I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified of voice training. And I was for 6 months. I did a lot of reading on it, and I did a lot of watching of YouTube videos and learned about all these different exercises like the big dog, small dog, whisper star, and some things I still use today. But I was so scared to even just make an utterance of my vocal folds and to be able to go like, ha. It's like, no, 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 too much, far too much. And so I practiced these whisper exercises for around about 6 months before I was finally able to be like, okay, let's just try making some sounds. And the thing that catalyzed that was me sitting with myself in lockdown, being like, okay, well, it's now or never. It really is now or never. And it was then that I found community. And it was then that I found VR chat in a much greater capacity than I ever had before. I mean, back then I'd been on VR chat briefly in the height of the Ugandan knuckles craze. I was like, do you know I was pretty good at it back then. Um, but I found that, this is actually something more to this. Um, I had been learning about my voice and starting to be able to talk to people in the same community on different voice servers and different discords. And I found so much commonality and so much shared experience and not only shared pain, but shared joy. That first time that someone's came back from laser and they're like, oh my God, this is smooth. The first time that someone's like done their hair in a way or gotten a wig and it's like, wow, this has completely transformed my face. And I started to see so much of myself in these people around me. And I started to really care about these people too. And they gave me so much love and unconditional, just this love and respect and a space to be myself. And I was just like, this is incredible. The community that I've lost from my job, from my bar work and all of this stuff, it's right here. It's been here all along. And why didn't I know more about this? And so I started to really go ham with voice. I was using my voice and training my voice around about 10 to 12 hours a day. I was just like obsessed. I was like, if I can move it this much, if I can get from, here to maybe about here, and then why can't I even go a little bit and start to change the voice even more? That little bit of positivity built and built in the same way that it did at the call center. It was momentum. The more optimism that I had, the more victories that I had, the more times that I tried, the more times that I succeeded, and the more I felt rewarded for doing so. And I was just enthralled by this change that was occurring inside of me and finding my voice. And I was also around about then seeing the state of trans voice training as it was. And unfortunately, in a lot of these servers, people had the best intentions in the world, but they just didn't have the ear for it. They didn't have the sound background, or they didn't have the technical ability to be able to make these things not ambiguous, be able to say specifically, this is a problem here, or this is a thing here. And so I started to act as like a little bit of a voice guru in these spaces. I had a group of friends and I started to help them to find their voices too. And I found that in the same way that I solved problems at this call center, I could solve problems here. And I was able to help these people that had helped me so much with their own voices too. So I then started to get involved with VR chat. And it was about this time that, after about a month or two, that I could consistently get like a she, her in voice comms. I was like, you know what? It's time to be me. And I'd always, 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 always had this name Rachel that was like close to my heart. That I always, and this is probably one of the earliest things, was that I just was like, oh, I really want that name for me from when I was a dot. And so I made this account, the same account that I'm on right now. And I was able to go out into these different places and talk to people and get treated completely differently. It's one thing to be talking in a trans voice server when everyone's on the same page and, it's really supportive, but it's a real baptism by fire sometimes coming into some of these online spaces and just trying it, trying to be you in the same way that you would out there in the world. And it worked. I was amazed. I've made some friends in that first month or two that I know I'm going to have for life. Big shout out to Charzy and Kev as well for that one. And it was also around about that time that I met Tizzy over here. We found each other in a server, and I was at that time, a couple months later, that I had started to offer my services of the skill that I've been unwittingly crafting for pretty much all of my life of performance, of problem solving, of technical analysis, of communication and empathy, of being able to turn that into something that could help to stop me from ever being homeless again. And so I just grabbed it with both hands and started to give out lessons to people. At first, it was like for like $10, just was like I'm training. I to try and help you, but it worked and it grew and it grew and it grew. And then I started this job. The pandemic eased out, and I started working 40 hours a week at this job. I was like, I can't let this die. I can't just like unplug from this Discord, from this experience, from these moments where I've had with people where they've first heard themselves and have heard themselves in a voice that meant something to them, that sounded like a she, her, and sounded like authentic. I've shared so many tears with people who have been able just to who've done the work, who got the momentum, and just Shia LaBeouf did it. um, and it was incredible. And I realized that this is my calling. This is what I need to do to be happy. I didn't care about dentistry, didn't care about computer science, anything, but just doing more voice work. So I kept it up for a year, working, as I say, 40 hours a week in a very intense job. I was head of customer service for this online retailer, and it was a lot. But I kept it up. And then the universe works in funny ways sometimes. And I was on TikTok one day and I came across Seattle Voice Lab and I started having a conversation. And then I was invited to an interview. And then I was able to drop this job that took so much from me and was able to go full time with my voice training. And it was just incredible. I could devote all of my heart and energy into these people who are at all sorts of different stages of their lives. There's no one time to do this. I've taught people from age 16 to like 68 and from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different levels of their transition and of the self-exploration and self-acceptance. And it was just one of the best experiences of my life to start to be able to do that alongside some of the most empathetic and talented individuals at this skill in the world. And I still highly recommend, if anyone's still thinking about voice training, Seattle Voice Lab is a superb option. It really, really is. So out of that, January rolled around. I'd still been talking a lot to Tizzy and like to lots of different people in our community and lots of other people in VR chat in these spaces that had grown so close to my heart. And she presented this idea of the academy and was like, look, we want to have you over here to start to teach. And I was a little nervous because so far it'd all been on the format of being in a call. Something really different when you can see someone right in front of you. And I know that we're all in avatars, but I still see all of your eyes, still see all of your movements, unless you're on desktop, then never mind. But I still see so much of your body language, and it was a different ball game. And all of a sudden, that social anxiety just like came right back. But I was like, you know what, this is an incredible opportunity. I've got to battle through it. And so I did. And the first lesson that I had here, I didn't sleep for around about like 24 hours after it. I was just like, I'm too jazzed to sleep. It's just like too intense. But it was amazing. And I started to do another one and then another one. And I started to have some students who had met me through the academy and who had been like, this has been so helpful. This has been the information that was so technical and difficult to put together. There were so many different avenues online. It was all in one place, and people were starting to reach out like, thank you for what you did. And it's like heartwarming. And so here we are, around about 6 months in now, and I've been teaching vocal feminization classes for every 2 weeks. And the plan of it is to really get as many people on stage as we can after we talk about safety and get everything out the way so everyone's nice and safe doing this, and to start to give them accessible and good voice advice. And this is just the beginning as well. I mean, the Trans Academy has started out from an idea and it's just grown and grown and grown almost exponentially into what we have now. And it's just absolutely amazing. So that's a little bit about my story and kind of tying it all up with a bow in the end. Some of the main things that if you could take anything away from this bit of a personal ramble, then some of the things would be momentum is so important. in not only in voice training, but in life, that sometimes one of the hardest things to do is to start to get the needle going. If we think about anything like a big old dial of 180 degrees with 0 on this side and like 100 on this side, and it's like whoosh, this sort of thing. Um, that first nudge can be some of the hardest things to do in the world. That first time that I tried putting on nail varnish, that first time that I tried to like shave my legs, and like, oh God, the first time that I did voice training, the first time that I ever got up on stage, um, it's the hardest. But then if we do it and we do another one and another one after that, and we start to build momentum, we start to raise up the level of whatever it is that we're doing, if it's music, if it's art, if it's reading, if it's physical fitness, whatever your endeavor is, practice that momentum, that idea of momentum that it's going to get better. And that the more that you put into it, and the more you put your heart and soul into it, the better it can be. And you'd be amazed at how things can just go exponential, like the Academy has here as well. Another little nugget of wisdom that I want to share with you all is that none of us are ever done in our development. Um, just like a piece of music, it's never truly done. We just decide, okay, it's good enough. With ourselves in our lives, there are so many lessons that we are yet to learn, so many experiences that we are yet to try. Um, and there's this lovely thing that I read once that was like, you haven't met all the people that are going to love you yet. And it's so true, because when I was, God, back at my parents' place after just being made kind of pretty much homeless, um, I didn't think that there'd be this out here for me. I didn't think that there'd be these communities where they helped me out through so much. And so you haven't met all the people that are out there that are going to love you yet. It's absolutely true. And we're never done developing. There are so many twists and turns in life, just generally, even outside of transition, that just hold on. Things are going to get better. And the only thing that's constant in life is change. The only thing that is always going to be the same is that everything keeps on changing and that nothing is forever. So know that, and know that there are people out here that can love you, and that there is so much support out there, and there's so much that you can do. Don't doubt yourself. I didn't for a minute think, when I started to learn about trans voice stuff, that I could do it at the start. And I was like, I had to allow myself that vision that maybe it could be me too. And as I say, it was so down low, I thought it was hopeless. But, I was terrified for 6 months. But here I am. And here I've seen so many other people be, who have started lessons with me, and who've then been like, you know what? I can actually do this. We just need a little bit of a guiding hand to go through and start to build that momentum and that skill. And the last thing I really want to say is just happy bloody Pride, everyone. It's been an absolutely amazing experience through and through to be here at the Academy. So I just want everyone to give yourselves a big old round of applause there, please, for just being here, for being you, and for just keeping on when things have been tough in the news and elsewhere. So just thank you all so much for being here. You are all amazing, honestly. Cheers. Thank you. Cheers. Right. Oh, I'm crying a little bit. So, I want to now go ahead and open up into a bit of a Q&A. So, if anyone's got any questions about me, about what I do, about voice stuff generally, anything at all, I'd love for you to just fire them at me, and I'm going to go from around about this side over around to the left, and we'll get through to as many as we can. Amazingly, I'm about on time, which I'm very surprised by. Anyone around here with any questions? The Sherris, hi Ash. Yeah, I had a really smooth ride with that one, funnily enough. Well, kind of two coming out. I had this bar job, and that's where I was like, hey guys, I suffer from gender dysphoria. This is a thing that I'm dealing with. And the implication there is I'm so uncomfortable with the idea of transitioning that this is what's up. And people were really, really cool about that. They're like, yeah, okay, dead name might shave their arms or, have a little bit of something. I found that really they didn't care at that stage, and the things that I did were a little bit more minimal at that point, so I don't know if that really counts. When I came out at my other job, and I should add as well that, I started transitioning medically, pretty much just after I found that I could get my voice sorted and I had some of my first experiences in BRC. In fact, 3 days ago was my 3-year HRT anniversary as well, so it's not been too long. Um, But I found that, like, I was still really spooked about presenting in public. I still had a big old beard. I had a lot of laser to do. So I had a pretty soft transition. I started just to continue with laser, start HRT until about like 6 months in. And then this job that I was working at, amazingly, it was a very small team. It was about like 3 or 4 people. Um, the boss who owned the whole company was trans herself, so it was pretty easy to make that switch once I was there. And I already told her in the interview. I was like, "Hey, on my CV, I put Rachel on, and then I bottled it on the day and presented mask." I was like, "Yeah, sorry about that." So everybody knew, and it wasn't too bad. But yeah, it was still difficult. I still found that, like, despite having my voice sorted out, on the phone or in VRC or on Discord or anything like that, being able to use it in public was a whole other challenge. And it took me around about 2 weeks to be able to acclimatize to being able to go like, "Hello, you're through to blah, 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 how can I help?" And not letting it just slide off because of nerves. Nerves are just so, so, so intrinsically tied to our voice that there's gonna be a rough couple of weeks while we start to like get the voice moving in public. Yeah, so it was a bit bumpy, but otherwise pretty okay. Thanks for the question. Um, and oh yeah, another follow up there, Ash. Yeah. So the question there for everyone watching is, when did I feel comfortable to be able to like dress more femininely and to be able to start to like come out a little bit more and present? And like at what point? And for me, like I was very gradual. I started out with just jeans and a t-shirt, and then I didn't have as tight a sports bra on. It's like, okay, let's go for an A cup with like a little bit of padding and like a little bit of nail. And then like I stepped it up to like like a scoopy kind of top as HRT started to do more for me. Um, I was still pretty androgynous and pretty like could go either way for a long time. I didn't wear my first dress until around about 9 months in, I think. Um, and I was terrified. I was terrified, but it was fine. And with transition, I find that like there's all these little hurdles, and a lot of them don't stop. There's always going to be new experiences, but eventually it gets more easy and comfortable. So yeah, I let laser do its thing. I let HRT do its thing a little bit more. Started to have like a little bit more bust and no shadow, because shadow was just like so hard for me to get rid of. Like the amount of different orange concealers that I tried. Haha, no, none of them are getting a sponsorship. They ever asked. It was really hard. So it was until I got laser sorted out and felt more comfy and like more easily able to blend that or feel comfortable in myself that I started going out and presenting a little bit more dresses. But great question. Thank you so much. Um, I still am behind from Snuggles. Hello, how can I help? I'm not sure. The question there was when I was talking about the app that we could use. What was the name of the app? I'm not sure. The last 30 minutes were a blur. Okay. Um, yeah, so it might have been a few things that I was talking about there. It might have been Seattle Voice Lab was the place that I worked with. Discord-wise, there are a bunch of amazing communities out there. The online vocal coach community is my favorite. They're really, really talented, and Celine from Online Vocal Coach is just phenomenally talented as well. So they host public lessons. Go check them out. Really, really good stuff. App and yes, absolutely. So Seattle Voice Lab is a voice alteration company. They do things including vocal feminization, masculinization, androgenization, public singing and singing. Sorry, public speaking and singing as well. So they've got, I think, around about, don't quote me on this, like 9 different coaches working with them there. It's headed by Claire Michelle, who is a great voice coach in her own right. And it's filled up with just a wonderful team, filled with people who are like stars from Broadway or have coached people that went on The X Factor and The Voice or are like yogic specialists. So it's a really cool, eclectic team of different people called Seattle Voice Lab. And you can find out more about those on seattlevoicelab.com as well. I should also probably mention self plug. Yeah, Seattle, sorry, just accent. No worries. No, yeah, no worries. So I would say, come along to one of our classes, or take a look at our YouTube videos as well on the Trans Academy YouTube channel. There are a bunch of stuff there. You can find my services on one-on-one coaching over on transvoice.com. So that's transvoice.com. And Seattle Voice Lab is another fantastic option that you can take a look at as well. So there's loads of stuff. The good news is that like as a field, I think that vocal feminization is just in its nascent stages and it's growing and growing. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much. Any other questions coming around this way? Anybody else? I see a hand up here. Purpose unknown. Hello. Hi. What's your question? Great question. No, love that. So the question there, just to reiterate to everybody on the stream, um, what do you think the future holds with technology and its role in vocal feminization training? I think it's a lot. I think it's pretty promising. Um, so currently, an option is to use a spectrogram. But the thing about a spectrogram is that it's quite a skilled thing to read. A spectrogram, for everyone who doesn't know, is a visual representation of all of the data that's like embedded within the voice. So you can take a look at resonance and weight and pitch and all these different things at the same time. It has its uses, but they are specific. And I think that a better thing that will come out likely, in fact, I already know of some studies that have been doing this, is that they've been putting in lots of different voices, both cis and trans, masc and femme, into an AI engine, and then being able to identify what that voice is likely to be, who that person is likely to be. Um, that's already in development, and I've tried it out, and it's quite fun. But it can be dysphoria inducing because, like, ooh, 95% woman. It's like, why didn't I get 98? Like, come on. So that's going to be a thing more. I think that in broader terms of automation and the role of AI, I've heard before that that any job that doesn't require person to person interaction can theoretically be automated. And so I do feel that the human element and the experiential element of being trans yourself and helping to guide people through in a kind of mentor space will remain likely as an offering in the trans voice space. Some other things that help as well. VR chat generally is a fantastic resource for being able to get the word out and being able to communicate these ideas in a way that is more engaging than a lecture. I know a lot of us have, either autism or ADHD or some different problems with that makes learning and attention more difficult. Um, and I think that the extra layer of interaction and engagement can help to keep people more switched on. As well as that, I think that VR chat really provides a fantastic space for people to be able to network and communicate and trial these things out and feel more themselves while doing so. One other thing as well is that with VRC, having an avatar that is more reflective of your gender identity is superb at helping to alleviate dysphoria and also anxiety and self awareness in the process. One of the things that I found with teaching voice is that there's this idea called inflection and intonation, which is all about the ups and downs of speech and where you kind of go with your speech. One of the things that can really help to bring that out is, dressing your best self, feeling your best self. And VR chat just makes it so much easier while eliminating dysphoria that if you see a woman in the mirror, that's easier to inhabit that headspace without having to go through all of the work of unpicking internalized transphobia. And that seeing yourself in there just helps so much as a shortcut. So I think a lot of these services will move more into these sort of spaces. I think that the development of avatar-based communications is still, again, in its earlier stages, but I think it's only going to get better and better and better. So I think not only could this happen more, but I think that other services could be in VR as well as it becomes more affordable and effective. And I think that finally, some combination of AI tools, spectrograms, and this automation stuff can help to spit out good feedback for people who can't perhaps currently afford a voice trainer or anything like that. So I see a bright and sunny future. It requires a lot of money, but the good news is that a lot of us trans girls are very technical and very good at what we do. So I could see a lot of good things coming out. Great question. Thank you so much. Any other questions from maybe behind here? I saw another hand just go up slightly. Yes. Where are you? Oh, there you are. You're a small one. Sorry. Hi. Yeah. The question there for everyone on stream is, do you have any words of wisdom for people who are experiencing really long wait times in the system? It's something that is unfortunately just so super common. I can't give medical advice, and I feel somewhat conflicted with advocating, like, oh, go on HRT. I think that the service that I use is called Gender GP, and they've been really, really helpful for me. The wait list currently in the UK is around about 5 years, and I think I've got another 2 years still to go. So I'm gonna rock up and be like, "Hi, guys, a bit late to the party." And, there's also a sad decrease in like, autonomy with these public health systems. Like, in the NHS, for example, they don't say you aren't able to get prescribed progesterone. We know in the community, that progesterone has palpable and great benefits, and I've been on it myself, but they say, "Oh, there hasn't been the scientific, evidence." And that lack of evidence is from a lack of funding, from a lack of, from institutionalized transphobia, I think, as well. So a lot of opinions there with that, but Gender GP, I believe they might operate internationally, but they've been amazing for me. It is a little bit dearer because there is a subscription fee of around about $40 a month-ish, don't quote me on that, and some initial upstart costs. But for me, it was incredible. I don't know where I'd be without them, So I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your question. They're able to help monitor with blood tests and endocrinologists in a more safe way than perhaps DIY could be, So great avenue to be able to be monitored in that. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions around about here as well? No. Yes, great. Yes, absolutely. Hi, Aurora. What's your question? That's a great question. I don't know anymore. I'm sorry. I lost the link to that a little while ago. It's a thing that's out there, but I'm afraid I'm not too sure. The question there, sorry, for the people on stream was, what's the AI assisted evaluation tool called? I'm not too sure. Um, Sorry about that. Any other questions around about here? Yes. Hi, Ina. How can I help? Yeah, no worries. The question there was to ask me about the prevalence of neurodivergency in trans spaces. Um, it's a good question. And, as far as I see it, for me, myself, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD like a year or two ago. Um, it's for me, it comes out in a space where it makes some tasks in executive function difficult, but not terrible. Um, I don't know if this is a side effect of the changes in perhaps mechanical brain structure that may result in an individual identifying as trans, or if it might also be that these, people who already are affected by neurodivergency may be more aware of their internal mental state, and they may be more inclined to self-evaluate and to be able to pass information of like, is this dysphoria, or instead of just shoving it down into the corner for 40 years, because we're more likely to question ourselves, I think. I think it's a bit of both. I think that there is probably some causal relations, um, and there's also some crossover of self-awareness. Um, and I think as well that generally speaking, that in the grand scheme of things, psychiatry as a field is still quite emergent. I mean, like Freud and Jung were not too far away in memory. It's only a couple of generations before that. Autism as a diagnosis is something that has only really been coming out more. I mean, maybe past the 50s. Again, don't quote me on that. And we're learning more about it as time goes on. So I think maybe even perhaps the structural framework with which we interpret neurodivergency as an ailment or as a thing instead of a different configuration that is not only valuable to society as a whole. I think that a lot of different things are changing around the perception of that, and that we still have very little idea about cognition and the mind in the grand scheme of things compared to some other things. I mean, like, we can talk to until the cows come home about quarks and subatomic particles, but in being able to know what is at the root of consciousness, which is so intrinsically tied into neurodivergency, we haven't got a Scooby. So I think time will tell. We'll see. I'm actually really kind of excited about the potential for AI to be utilized in a way in which we can talk to a language model about these concepts of neurodivergency, and they can spit out information to us, assimilating data from encephalograms and all sorts of different things that might be more easy to understand. I think that we're probably going to see some exciting things in the future. For the time being, I think it's just a thing for a few factors. Great question. Any other questions around here? Yes, Shay. Hi. Oh, and of course the stream and everything as well. Yes. Okay. Possible. Hello. Great question. So the question there was, if you start hormone therapy, if you take hormone therapy, do you have to take it for your whole life? Again, I must preface this by saying that I am not a medical professional. It's not my area of expertise, and I don't have the qualifications for this. So this is not official medical advice. But what I can say from my understanding of it and experience as a trans woman is that, yes, it is something that is designed to be taken for your whole life. Um, what happens with feminizing HRT, for example, is that it can reduce the activity of the testes to be able to produce testosterone. And if you have an orchiectomy or some sort of other gender confirming surgery, then the thing that makes testosterone is gone. So if you have that lack, and if you stop taking estrogen, progesterone, or other feminizing hormones, then there is a distinct lack of hormones in the body. This can cause and contribute towards osteoporosis, fatigue, depression, mood problems generally. So it's important to have one primary sex hormone in the body at least, is the answer. So yes, long term, I plan to be on HRT until I am under the ground. It's the plan. Yes, great question. Any other questions around about here? Oh, and Shay, are there any questions on the streams at all or anything like that on Twitch or Discord? Oh, perfect. Hi, Lilia. How are you doing, Lilia? What's your question? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the question there was, when I started doing lessons, what was kind of the hardest thing about it? And I think one of the hardest things with teaching vocal feminization is simultaneously knowing how important the end result is for us as individuals, how difficult the job of practicing can be, and its effect. So, I've had some students that I've had for a long time who haven't been able, by a variety of factors, to create that momentum. We talked earlier about momentum, this idea of building it and going further and further. Like, we start off practicing for maybe 10 minutes a day, then 20 minutes, then we have maybe half-hour conversations. But at some point, we are going to want to be able to be at a place where we can switch over to the voice as a full-time gig and just not have to worry about it. Like for me, I wake up, I sound like this, cool beans. Um, and so, like, we need to get momentum. We need to start to build more opportunities to be able to talk. And when people are in perhaps early transition or they've been transitioning for a while but haven't been able to make much progress because of environment, fear, safety, these different variables, and they haven't been able to practice, and then they stagnate into a place of, I want to do this. I know I'm spending more money on voice training, but I can't practice, but I don't want to let it go. Then I think some of the first in my early days, it was hard to have the conversation with, "Look, is this the right time for you? Is this gonna be something that you're able to commit more energy to, or is this something that what I don't wanna do is prolong it and draw it out." If people aren't making progress, then I will tell them, and I'll say, "Look, you aren't moving along in a reasonable enough manner for me to justify you spending this money on these sessions." And that can be a hard conversation to have when you know how crushing that can be. But on the flip side, that can be a nice wake up call to be like, I need to start to do this more. I need to invest in myself. I might need to change my environment. And then they come back with renewed vigor and like, yes, let's get it. Let's go. So I think that was one of the hardest things to do. Not the technical stuff of the equipment, but that managing. Yeah. Great question. I've got time for probably one more. I'm going to take it from this side over here. Any questions all around here? Yep. Hi, Rue. What's the question? Yeah, absolutely. The question there was, when I was starting out with my voice journey, were there any particular goals? Who did I try and emulate to be able to get to where I am today? Um, I must say that Ziana from Trans Voice Lessons was a massive inspiration, as I think as she is to so many. She's contributed hugely to the accessibility and availability of resources globally, and her impact is seen in the verbiage that we use, the techniques, and I think that seeing her do that was just like, look, if you can do it, I want to do it. Let's go. I also think that, Celine of Online Vocal Coach was a fantastic mentor. They didn't officially mentor me, but I attended many, 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 many hours of public lessons to be able to experience the problems people were having and how they were resolved on a professional level. That was very important to me too. Um, Outside of that, with regards to vocalist setting goals, I think that it's hard sometimes to have an image of a voice and to be like, that's who I want to sound like. Because our instruments are all different. We can take qualities. Maybe if you want like a more fry voice or like, like a lower kind of mummy voice, any sort of different variable of voice, we can think, I want a bit of your energy. But having a one-to-one map is tricky and I think can be frustrating, especially in the early days. I think it's more important that when you're beginning to gain individuated control of resonance, pitch, and weight, be consistent with them and then see what emerges and then see like, yeah, this is kind of adjacent to this, or maybe I want more like sass and more fry in my voice, or whatever it might be to take a little bit of an ingredient from that. I think that's a good way to answer that. But thank you. Great question, Rue. And with that, everyone, we're about up to time, but I want to again thank you all so, so much for spending your time here with me. Happy Pride to every little one of you and all the love in the world. You all take care. Bye for now. Cheers. Take care, all. Cheers.